Do you wish you knew your mission in life? Can you imagine how much you can accomplish if you knew what your mission is? You know, you're doing this, you're busy, that, you're all busy. We're all busy. But if you know what your mission, you can accomplish, and that focus, you can just get to a place you couldn't have gotten before. Today, we have Jonathan Rosenblum, who is a massive, he's written so many biographies of like unbelievable people. And he's also a columnist for Mishpacha magazine. He's a genius. And he's here with us today to talk about how these people knew their mission and how you can know your mission too. This is Leah Richeimer. We'll see you in a moment. Jonathan Rosenblum and his wife, Judith, are here in the studio, are not here, they're in Israel, but they're here today. They're longtime friends of mine, and it's just such an honor because he's a big famous author, and everywhere he goes, everyone wants a piece of information. What do you got to say? And what he says every week in his columns, like, it's not to be missed. He's such a genius, and he's going to help us taking a look at how their mission has, having focus has been able to accomplish great things, like what we want you to learn to sort of see from that. And then we're going to go through a little bit of lessons and how to find your own mission. But first, we want to see what it is, what people can accomplish with that. So without further ado, I'm very, very excited to have here today. We have Jonathan Rosenblum and his wife, Judith, longtime friends, and welcome to the Ladies TalkShow.
Nice to be here with you, Leah.
I just have to warn you, we go in fast, very deep. So I just have to ask you, come on, I'm doing the dishes, I'm carpool, I'm running a corporation. Really, I'm supposed to now have another to-do list about getting a mission in my life. Like, oh my gosh, that's just like in the too hard basket. How do these people who have a life mission, how are they able to focus in that way with all the myriad of things that they were doing to be able to accomplish so much?
Well, if you're asking about the people about whom I've written, or are you asking about the lady who's got all the dishes to do and the carpools to run?
Maybe start with them, and then we'll go to the dishes.
Well, I think the last book that has just been published in the last 2 months probably brings out this idea of having a focus on a mission more clearly than any other. Rameir Schuster.
What's the title of the book?
The title is A Tap on the Shoulder.
It's a rage. Like, everybody I know is reading this book. Like, it's the summer read of
except you, Leah. Except you.
At least I haven't. I haven't started it yet because I've got a big bandwidth. But anyways,
It's called A Tap on the Shoulder, Rabbi Meir Schuster and a Magical Era of Tshuva. And, it's particularly meaningful to us because in some ways it recounts a generation in the late 70s and early and 80s of which we were very much a part. So that's it's in part a personal story from our point of view as well. We also hosted people for Rev Schuster. Everyone would have told you, everyone who ever knew Rameir Schuster, who knew him as a youngster, if they had said there's one person, two things Rameir Schuster will never be able to do. He could never do kiruv, anything that involved talking to people, outgoing. He was shy, withdrawn. It was sometimes painful in his youth for him to, couldn't initiate conversations and raise money. And he did both. He had to support the Heritage House, which was a very large operation beginning in 1984. That's a miracle. David Refson, the dean of Neve Yerushalayim Seminary, said of him, I think he was the most successful person who ever lived in terms of extracting the maximum from his whatever natural gifts Hashem had blessed him with. And his sense of mission, I think, was stronger than, probably the strongest of anybody I've ever written about. That sense of mission, that there was nothing, as it says in one of the Project Inspire videos that was done on his life, showed on Tisha B'Av 2 years ago. At the very end, he's telling an interviewer, there's nothing more important in the world than kiruv. There's nothing more important in the world than helping Jews to find their way back to their Creator and to Torah.
Wait, can I ask you a question? Because I've always heard that if the way you know your mission is what you're good at, or what, strength that God, natural strength that God gave you, or what you like to do, like that's sort of how it tailors into what your mission should be. So now what you're saying is he was shy and he couldn't speak and he whatever. And why would he choose a mission so off the charts, not appropriate for him? Like, I've got to go talk to him. Well, he's no longer alive.
Okay, now
Tell him hello.
it's very, very true. Rev Yisrael Salanter used to say that everybody has to know their faults and they have to know their strengths. But it's tragic if a person doesn't know his faults and what he has to work on. But it's even worse if a person doesn't know his strengths, because his strengths will be the primary source of his avodas Hashem. That will be his primary unique contribution to the world.
Work to God.
Will usually be in terms of his strengths. So a person has to know his strengths. But there's another thing, and the Sforim talk about this. There's a new book out, by the way, on this subject of finding your mission. It's called Nurture Their Nature. It's based on the shirim of Rab Beryl Gershenfeld, who is the Rosh Hashiva of Mechon Shlomo and Mechon Yaakov, two Baal Tshuva yeshivas in Har Nov. And it's put out, it should be an extraordinary book. And it focuses precisely on this question of developing one's sense of mission. Sometimes your mission is just thrust upon you. You couldn't have picked it out. You didn't know when it was going to happen.
You said something about Rabbi Dessler that happened to him. It was thrust upon him. I would love to hear what
I said it was thrust upon him, but he obviously sensed when Rabbi Dessler, 10 years before his death, he was separated from his family. They had gone to Lithuania just before the outbreak of the war. His son was already in America. His wife and daughter were very lucky to be able to escape from Lithuania and eventually made their way to Australia. He didn't see his wife or daughter for 7 years. He probably didn't see his son for even longer than that. He was all alone in England. He was the greatest thinker of the first half of the 20th century, spent most of his time tutoring high school kids, most of them who were public school kids. Many of his most famous essays had already been written, but no one knew about them. He got a letter in the mail from Reb David Dryan, who was a moil in Gateshead. There was not at that time a single kollel any place in Western Europe. And the letter proposed that he would set up a kollel in Gateshead, and who was interested in joining this. Reb David Dryan sent this letter to 21 rabbanim in England. Most of them didn't even bother to answer. One or two expressed some interest, but said the time was not propitious. It was in the middle of the war. The only one who answered affirmatively, who was willing to take on this burden, was Rav Dessler, who saw it as something. This is something that we can do. In his sense of commitment at that time, he never slept on a bed during the war. He rode around England on a train, up at night and then teaching during the day, arriving back in Gateshead on Thursday and staying till Motzi Shabbos.
He didn't want to be in a bed and have a
while Jews were being killed, while the slaughter was going on. He knew enough about what was going on in Europe to not want to partake to try and minimize his own pleasures. He wouldn't eat meat during the war. I think Rav Shraga Feivel Mendelovitz, another subject of another biography, also did not eat meat during the entire war. So there was a sense that you can, as he put it, we're no longer living lives for ourselves. We're living lives for Klal Yisrael. Everything that we have to do has to be committed to Klal Yisrael. But that was thrust upon him. This letter came out of the blue. If he had not responded to that letter, we would know nothing of Rav Dessler today. His writings probably would have been lost. They never would have come out in the published form. But instead, he spent 6 years creating the Gateshead Kollel, another 3 or 4 years as the Mashgiach in Ponevezh Yeshiva. Was a life changed the face of the world. He also mentored my own Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapiro, probably the greatest, most original thinker of the second half of the 20th century, who was a distant relative and lived in his house as a 13, 14-year-old boy. So, the accomplishment at 10 years was amazing.
So his mission was thrust upon him. And Meir Schuster, from your latest book, his How did he get a mission
He had a
to
passion.
help people when he couldn't talk?
He saw his passion for what he was doing was so great. His sense of what was necessary and urgent was so great that it was overcome. And the truth of the matter is, I would say that the book is really a case study in how does one merit siyata d'shmaya? How does one merit divine assistance in their work? And no one ever doubted, everyone who ever had any contact with Reb Meir Schuster knew that he was a beneficiary of untold siyata d'shmaya.
I'm so excited. It's on my nightstand. I'm so mad I didn't already read it. Anyway, whatever. Life is life is life. Hold on a second. We've got a lot of things, questions coming in from all over the place. Sarit, go ahead. You get just only one because I want to continue with this.
Well, people are just asking, all these individuals obviously sound beyond. And you read all these biographies, you read about Henny Machlis and what she sees, right? But as a regular woman who's at home watching her kids, that just sounds way too lofty. Meaning it doesn't even sound possible.
Well, depends on, first of all, the one thing that I think is great about Reb Meir Schuster is that he was not in any obvious way preternaturally gifted in some way that no one else is. I mean, I don't think raising good children, every child is different. Everyone gets the children for whom they'll be more capable of raising them than anybody else. To produce it, Rav Dessler had a mother, Rav Yaakov had a mother. Everybody had a mother. A lot of what they had, I wrote about Mike Tress and Moshe Scher. They're the two founders. Mike Tress, the founder of the American Aguda movement, and Moshe Scher, the great leader for another 30 years after Mike Tress's passing. They were first cousins. They grew up with this memory. This was a memory. They were 10 years apart in age, but this was a memory that they both grew up with, of getting up in the morning and hearing their mothers had gone out on a mission. And if there was a new mother in the neighborhood in Williamsburg where they lived, they had left food by her door. They had left some cash for the family, and they came home, and this was a mitzvah b'seser, a hidden mitzvah, and they'd come home and they'd be drinking coffee together and laughing over the fact that they got away with another mitzvah and no one had discovered who had done this. Can you imagine what an impact that has on a child to hear your mother, the pleasure that she gets out of having done this mitzvah, of helping a new mother out, of having raised the money and so forth? And their tears, the tears of the mothers when they lit the candles, those were life-changing. For Moshe Scher talked about it all the time, how his mother would daven for him as a child, the sacrifices she made once when he was sick as a child to get medicine for him. And then she was rushing home with the medicine, which she thought might be life-saving. And she fell and the medicine cracked and it was rolling out on the pavement. And she went back into the pharmacy where she'd got it, distraught, crying, offering to clean for weeks and weeks if they would just give her another dose of this medicine. Those things live with you. I don't think.
Yeah, but the worthiness is in the act themselves, and not necessarily that there were famous men that came out of their mothering. And I think that's the question that you started with, is really about just ordinary people. And how do we find our mission? So I think I'd like to go there and speak a bit about that too, because
that's fantastic. By the way, Judith is a psychotherapist. Did I get it right? I was like, anyway, psychotherapist. So she's been practicing for many, many years.
Much harder in Hebrew.
What did you say? In Hebrew?
Psychotherapist is much harder in Hebrew. You're doing pretty well.
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
Somebody on Facebook is writing, I think my mission is managing to get dinner on time for my husband.
There you go. That's good. Good on you. That's great. Okay, that's it. Did you hear that, Judith? That was her mission. So, she said that her mission was to get dinner on time for her husband when he comes home. It's a fantastic mission, and maybe that's it. Maybe that's our mission, is to be the best wives we can be. Let's get to it. Wink, wink. But I want to hear what you had to say about.
Well, I think that our missions can change over time. With Mayor Schuster, he had this one mission, and it stayed with him all the years from when he was young and until he reached the end of his life. But I don't know that it's like that for everybody, that there's just one mission, especially for women as we go through the stages of life, so much about our lives has to do with our family and how we adapt ourselves. So I think that, our mission can change depending on the circumstances that we're in and the challenges that we're facing then.
We have 2 grandchildren right on the opposite side of that door right now. So there's a big transformation from being a parent to being a grandparent to being empty nesters and just enjoying the grandchildren during summer vacation, or they're in camp now. So they're coming to Yerushalayim for B'nai Brak. There are, I think a woman actually feels this even more, the different stages of development, because she's so invested in her family. So inevitably, the change from young motherhood to adult children and there's so many things that you could never appreciate. I always say, when you're looking for a wife, everybody has their long checklist of things that they think they're looking for. And I suppose the marriage counselors tell you to cut that list down. But one thing I'm confident that nobody in the history of the world has ever put on their marriage list is, will she be a good mother-in-law? And yet, if you want to think about your happiness in the world, we have 7 sons and one daughter. So if Judith weren't the greatest mother-in-law and they all didn't want to come here all the time, and your children want to be with you and they want to be a family together, it's interesting, when my children do something in free time, they always do it with one another. That's the only people they ever really socialize with, and to gather together is their greatest fun. But, and we're just reaping the benefits now at this stage in our life.
Well, also the other thing that people should understand, even if they don't have a mission to do care of work like Mayor Schuster, if the mission is to be, okay, right now I'm at this stage of my life, I've got 4 under 7, four kids under 7 years old, or I've got, I'm an empty nester and I'm busy sending gifts to all the grandkids, whatever that mission is, to do it with kavanah, with thought and with forethought, to say, okay, this is my mission now. My mission right now is to make my husband my number one priority. Why? So besides shalom will bless that, and God's Shekhinah will, the God will come and surround our house and give us joy and blessings. And not just that, but my mission is to make him happy. He'll make me happy. I'm going to dedicate myself to that, instead of making, okay, yeah, well, I'm going to work on my marriage. Yeah, well, we tried therapy, didn't really work, so whatever, is to actually make it your mission and say, you know what, I've got one life. It's not a dress rehearsal. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to make that my mission, until it comes along and I say, oh, I need to save all the kids who are starving, or orphans in Israel, or whatever it is that you can think of that's some grand mission. Whatever you're doing right now, make that your mission. Okay, sorry, we've got waving hands here.
Somebody on Instagram said, as does Jocelyn on Instagram said, he's amazing, can't stop listening. I guess they like the story. So I really want to hear his wife tell some of her thoughts from a woman's perspective, what she thinks the mission in life of a woman would be.
I don't think we heard what the question was. I'm happy to turn it over to Judith. That's great. But
the question that she had for Judith is this: to talk a little bit more about a wife's mission, because we're all harried. We all have a million things. And with COVID, we were the mother, the teacher, the everything. So how we sort of differentiate, knowing our mission in life.
Right. Okay. And
look at the camera.
Yeah. Okay. So I think a lot of us are confused by that. And because we read about all these wonderful, great people that are with their single mission, and who am I? What am I? What's my mission? I talk to a lot of people, and I find myself so often in awe. I'm supposed to be in some way a role model, in some sense that I supposedly have it together. But women come in and tell me stories, and I sit there in awe of the example you gave, let's say somebody who's totally devoting herself to her husband, or someone who didn't yell at their children when extremely provoked, or somebody who was able to say that, be assertive and say something to someone in the store that insulted them. But we're faced with these challenges all the time, and I think that this is part of our mission. I think as women is taking things on to find our better self is part of it. I think also finding meaning, our personal meaning and what we're doing in our life, and as
like what? Can you explain what you mean finding meaning?
I think one part of finding meaning is chesed. I don't want to make that sound trite, but I think that when
kindness.
we give of ourselves, I think we have a satisfaction of we're doing something beyond just who we are. We're also
giving to others.
Yeah, we're giving to others, and we have that sense that it's something greater than just ourselves.
I want to add one thing here is there's one mission that every Jew has, though the way it will be expressed is different. We're all here to make a Kiddush Hashem in the world. Now, if there's one thing...
Explain Kiddush Hashem, Rabbi.
Well, Kiddush Hashem means that a person looks at you and they say, oh, that is what it means to be connected to God, to live a life according to the dictates of Torah, that a person feels themselves, that you've increased God's glory in the world. I mean, and that through your actions and through the fact that you're shaped by the Torah, people see another perspective on life and they feel an attraction to Torah. This was, all the people I've written about have been very disparate people. But I found out that the common thread through all their lives was this aspect of Kiddush Hashem. Just give you a very simple.
You mean that they were motivated to do that, or that was the end result?
That they were conscious. I'll give you two examples from Rav Dessler.
Okay.
Rav Dessler, one of the people who used to come to Rav Dessler as a high school boy to be tutored by him was named Mordechai Miller. He went on to become the dean of the Gateshead Seminary in Northern England. Maybe the most influential educator, certainly women's educator of the second half of the 20th century. He came as a young boy, and he used to go on a double-decker bus in London to come to Rav Dessler. Rav Dessler told him, always go up to the upper deck in this bus, because then somebody might come to you. The conductor likely will not get to you because you have a short ride, and then you'll be able to say to the person next to you in a loud voice, see, the conductor didn't get here. Here's my fare. Please pay him when he gets there. In other words, not just that you should make a Kiddush Hashem, you should look for opportunities to make a Kiddush Hashem.
So gorgeous. Is that gorgeous? Gorgeous. Oh my gosh. That's inspiring. Really inspiring. Okay, good. What's the other one? That's great. Did everyone understand that? Meaning he could have just got on the bus and popped off the bus, but he purposely, Rav Dessler told him to go to the second story so that the conductor wouldn't get there, so that all the people who are watching would see a Jewish person say, here, please pay this when the conductor comes, like to highlight what a honorable person was, make it look good. It's amazing. That's a really beautiful thing. Okay, good. What's the second story?
Well, the second story is that once Rabbi Miller came in to Rav Dessler, and Rav Dessler was talking to a sash maker who was in his apartment.
What's a sash?
A sash is like a curtain.
Oh, okay, fine.
Curtain.
Okay.
So anyhow, he asked the curtain maker, are you using the best material? And the person said, yes, Rabbi, only the best material. And he said, oh, I don't need the best. I only need what's serviceable. So after the man had left, Rav Dessler said to this young boy, a 14-year-old boy, do you understand what that conversation was about? Let me explain to you. He knows I'm a renter. He knows the way of a renter who needs a repair is to take the most expensive repair and then deduct it from the rent. I wanted to show him that, and he knows I'm a rabbi. I wanted him to see that that's not how a rabbi behaves. whatever is serviceable is enough. I wanted him to say, no, only the best, so I could say, no, I don't need the best, only what's serviceable. How much thought went into that conversation? It wasn't a simple conversation. It was a very complicated conversation.
And that's a Kiddush Hashem. And I introduced, now you explained Kiddush Hashem. What was Suri, what was he going to tell us that he was in the middle of, that he talked about Kiddush Hashem?
No, we were talking about he was interjecting on beautifully on his wife's comment about a woman's mission and making that her.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I'm saying, Suri keeps me on track. Okay, Suri. Okay, so go ahead. You can go with it.
Actually, somebody from Facebook actually wrote, I know people are so good helping other people and their friends and they fundraise, but all say that's at the expense of their family where they fall short.
Were you able to hear that, Jonathan?
I heard that, and the truth is that there's often a price to be paid for certain aspects of greatness. I know I saw it in my mother's family growing up. My grandfather was a very famous communal activist and philanthropist, and it took a toll. With Rav Meir Schuster, I'll give you just the most poignant example is that when Rav Schuster, they lost their first child. She was 6 years old. She was a child who was so overwhelmingly attractive. She was behend. She was so charming that one couple told me that after they had been in Israel in the Ezra's Torah neighborhood where the Schusters lived, on their way back on the plane, all they could talk about was this 6-year-old child. She was hit by a car on the Arab-driven truck on the day after Pesach, the first day after Pesach, and killed. During the week, Rav Schuster felt that his being at the Kotel for all these Jews who he used to bring to yeshivas and so forth was life-saving. If you're saving a life, pushes off every other mitzvah, then saving a soul also pushes off every mitzvah. And he wanted to go to the Kotel. He sent a question to Rabbi Eliashiv, who was the greatest halakhic authority in Eretz Yisrael, a living halakhic authority in Eretz Yisrael. And eventually Rabbi Eliashiv told him that he shouldn't go to the Kotel because people wouldn't understand. But he said your calculation is correct. And he actually came and made a shiva call to the Schusters. He rarely left Mea Shearim where he lived, and he made a shiva call to the Schusters. But Mrs. Schuster told me that at that time, as a young mother, having just lost her firstborn child, it was hard for her to see her husband. She said, couldn't you give your daughter at least a week of shiva? And he couldn't, but it was not easy to understand that. These things, there's always a trade-off.
You mean I just want to make sure I understood the story. When his daughter was nifter, he was sitting shiva, and he felt like he still should go to the Kotel to help people to save their souls, to help bring them
do whatever he did, yeah.
Educate them and all this.
He said it was life-saving work.
So and Rabbi Eliashiv told him, no, stay home and sit shiva for
Rabbi Eliashiv told him, your calculation is correct, but people won't understand. It will look too strange and you should stay. I think on Shabbos that week, he did go, where there's no public mourning on Shabbos, that he did go to the Kotel. But I'm saying it wasn't something that everyone could understand, including his own wife. Did not understand it as, it's not, there's a trade-off. Things are not simple in the world. Things are complicated. There's not one perfect right thing to do, which will have no adverse consequences, and anything else you do will. It's not like that. The world is more complicated.
Okay, so I have a next question, and Judith, maybe you also can chime in on this, but this is a question for both of you, is that should a person read these books on Gedolim, on great people, because it just makes us feel less than, it makes you feel like, oh, they're just wonderful. It makes you compare your husband to this great Gadol who did all these wonderful things and brought his wife flowers every day and drove down the street and then said, did I say goodbye to my wife? And drives back and says goodbye to his wife. All these stories.
I don't have any stories like that.
Oh, but I'm saying, you tell the story of how great the people are, and Rav Meir Schuster, you said when you read it, you get inspired to be your best self. But I mean, it also kind of makes you feel like you're in the shadow and like, oh my gosh, I can hardly get dinner on the table.
No. It makes you understand that when you commit yourself in a certain way, you will get help from above. If you've aligned yourself with God's purposes in the world, you'll get help. You will get help. I disagree with you. I mean,
I'm asking. I'm not.
From the time I started writing Reb Yaakov, my goal as a biographer was to bring out the uniqueness of each one. Not that you should go through some hagiography and a stylized biography. At 5, he knew all of Tanakh. At 12, he finished,
right.
did a Siyum Hashas.
Also the humanness.
The humanness, that their individuality and each one of them should be different. But not only that, Mike Tress became the leader and the founder of the Aguda movement in America. He never spent a day in yeshiva. Okay? What can you say about Mike Tress, that he had a bigger heart than you do? I mean, that may be true. That may also be a kochas and nefesh. But I wanted to write about people with Meir Schuster. The book I always wanted to write was about people who none of their gifts stood out so great, were so great that everybody saw that they were destined for greatness. We're very bad predictors of the future, terrible predictors. Rosh Hashivas aren't good predictors. Nobody's a good predictor who will make the biggest impact on the world. We really don't know, and we can't predict those. It's not just a matter of native strengths or having been born into a meyuchas, a distinguished lineage or anything like that. Having married the daughter of the richest man in the world. Those are not the criteria. Those are not the criteria which will determine one's success in life and one's impact on the world.
So right now we're talking about greatness, is like celebrity. Like, in other words, these people became famous. They had books written about them. I mean, and that shouldn't be necessarily our goal. And what Judith, maybe you can answer for us what our goal should be. It'd be nice to have a book written about you and people say, ooh, there's so-and-so, whatever. Mostly that's just annoying. You can't kind of walk around. Yeah.
I think it's that we should be able to get to try and be the best person that we can be, but be ourselves. And, does Hashem love great people more than he loves just us average people? I think we know that that's not the case. So can we also appreciate and love ourselves and value ourselves and what we're doing, and I think, yes, be inspired by books about people who have gone on to achieve things. I think there is value in that, because I look at what else we're exposed to. It's clear that we're influenced by our environment. So to have, if it's being inspired by a sefer about a gadol, then that can help us to offset the influences.
Right, and by the way,
it's not just their achievements. Let's say in the Rabbi Yaakov book, if I asked you at the end of the 400 pages of Rabbi Yaakov, what were his greatest achievements, I don't think you could possibly tell me any distinct, precise achievement. What you would understand there, that he was a model of a certain type of a person who lived his life with a cheshbon, but he was normal. I mean, and all the Kamenetskis, from his descendants, every one of them 3 generations down, the most important word is normal. I once asked somebody who grew up in Rabbi Yaakov's home, or was a housebacher by him for a few months, what did you see? He said, I saw absolutely nothing. As the first person I interviewed for the book told me, riding with Rabbi Yaakov was like being in a Lincoln Continental. You didn't know you were moving. He was so at ease. He was so good. A friend of mine in the neighborhood, his shidduch was made by Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, the Rosh Hashiva in Philadelphia. His wife was an Israeli young woman in America for a period of time, teaching Hebrew someplace in Philadelphia. In a terrible snowstorm, she got dropped off at the Philadelphia Shiva and was in the office. And Rav Shmuel came in and asked her about herself, a complete stranger in his yeshiva. And then he said to her, oh, I'm going to Israel soon. Is there anything I can bring to Israel for you? Is there anything? That's not normal, but it's human. It shows how far a person can refine themselves. how much it gives you a sense we can do a little bit better. It's only I can do a little bit better. If we're a little bit more aware, a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more thought out, what we can make ourselves, not the achievements, not the fame. Fame is it's pathetic.
Yeah.
I mean, seeking fame. You ask, I once wrote a column about this, about Israeli teenagers. When you ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say, I want to be famous. Famous for what? I don't know. Axe murder? I don't know. I just want to be famous. Now that's sick. That's chaser to want to be famous as a goal. That's not the goal. And certainly not anything that anybody, about whom I've written ever thought.
Right. And I also didn't, I've read a lot of your books, and I myself am inspired of them and feel like a better person. I kind of was being a little devil's advocate there. So don't think I'm trying to say, no, they're inspiring. They do give me a feeling of, here's where I am and here is the gap. That's a good thing. Like it grows you, you can get down a little bit and push yourself, but that is what our purpose in life is to maximize our midos, maximize the potential, be the best we can be, and work, and raise ourselves up to the highest level we can from wherever we came from, as long as we're on the ladder going up. So now, for those of you who really want a mission and see, I've got a lot of kind of empty nesters or people whose kids are just going to school, whatever, they email me and say, Leah, I feel like, I could be doing more with my life. What should I be doing more? Volunteering for the marriage campaign for the Ladies Talk Show. Yes. Okay. But one, it's for those of you who really have a little extra bandwidth and want to grow yourself, get yourself a journal, get yourself, even anything on your computer, you can get an app or something, or on your phone, something that, you can jot down your notes and write down, what do I love doing? What do I see out there that's needed, that's not being currently taken care of? There's a woman who started in our neighborhood. She bought all these cribs. She raised money and she bought all these porta cribs and high chairs, because we have a lot of out of town people coming. And so now she's got a gemach of people who, if you've got people coming, you call up and say, oh, I need 2 porta cribs. Do you have blankets? Do you have what else? She has bicycles. Okay,
so right. let me take off on that.
Okay, good.
I've often thought that one of the weaknesses of telling Jewish history from the point of view of a few great figures is that it causes us to think that, well, everything is done by the great figures. That's not true. Jewish society advances. There's always a top to bottom movement as well. And that's why I always wanted to write a book of 25 people who did something. If you don't sit around and think, oh, if this were really a problem, then the Gedolim would have seen it. If this were really a problem, the Torah leaders would be addressing it. If you see something, like in Israel, they say, if you see something, report it. If you see something suspicious, report it. If you see something that's not right in the world and you can address it, first think, is there anything I can personally do about it? When Rav Moshe Sher, at a certain point in his life, he contracted lymphoma and he wasn't seen in public for 6 months. His immune system was down. He was a person who always took great pride in the impression that he made. All his hair fell off and so forth. But he insisted. At some point, his son got a call from him saying, I want to go and speak up in the mountains during the summer camp season to the girls, the 8 and 9 and 10-year-old girls at a particular camp. And his son was saying, are you sure you can go out? The doctors cleared you and so forth. He didn't, but he said, if you're going, I only on one condition, that I can drive you. And what was the big speech that Rav Moshe Sher felt it was worth coming out of isolation after such a long period for? He just wanted to tell them, if you go into your class, you're 8 years old, and you see a girl who looks unhappy. So your first reaction might be, she had better friends than I do. So if I see it, then they must have seen it. She has other people that she's closer to, so they'll take care of it and not me. No, that's what the messaging was. If you see it, it's now your mission. You saw something. If you see it, do something about it. Because that's how Hashem works it out in the world. this happens to be my 70th English birthday today.
Happy birthday. We have this. Happy birthday to you. Yay.
So one of my children, I think a grandchild or a child, wrote in the birthday book that we did. We went away as a family for 3 days. One of them wrote, "Your birthday is," it was my granddaughter. It's coming up to her bat mitzvah next week. And my granddaughter wrote, "Your birthday is the day when Hashem decided the world could no longer get along without you." You just know that you have something every moment.
Write that down, Alana. That's a keeper. Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Wow. That's beautiful. Oh, hold on.
Okay, so saying,
yeah, go ahead. Finish your thing. And then we've got a lot of questions.
If you see it, you own it. Now do something.
That's another one. If you see it, you own it. Yeah, go ahead.
Jonathan wrote this beautiful column on for his 70th birthday, and with all of his many accomplishments, he wrote about a new mission for himself, which is that he realized, what am I talented in? What can I really do, and how can I contribute something to the world? And I can be a friend, because I like to talk to people, and people like to talk to me, and it's easy for me to share, and then it makes it easier for people to share, and they can just, not as a therapist, just as a friend. And I think that that's something quite inspiring, because, he's done so many things in his life, but this is what he now realizes, this is what's important, is be a friend.
They're both important, but I just saw, I always want, they say everybody should have their own mitzvah, the one that they try to do, that they feel particularly drawn to. And I never figured out what was my mitzvah. And then I realized that there's two, that I have a capacity for making friends. And I'm also good. I like to compliment people. And I'm good. It's not because I flatter people. I tell people good things about themselves because I have a good eye for seeing the good in people. But it comes to me naturally to compliment people. Now, I've written a bunch of these columns, just a plug for your program, Leah. Okay. I've written a column on turning 50, on turning 60, on turning 70. So one of my friends said, I asked him, how'd you like the on turning 70? He says, it's the same column you've been writing since you turned 50. I married Judith, and everything turned out much better than I ever expected.
That's adorable. That's very heartwarming. That's adorable. Okay, let's go in with the questions. Go ahead.
So somebody's saying, I'm feeling like it from Facebook. I'm feeling like this lately. Like, do I just work and be content, or do greater things? Do I take that risk? Meaning, as a mother or as someone who's working, how does somebody figure out
what's too much to take on? What is it like? Well, my husband just recently told me, he said, "Oh, I've got this idea." He goes, listen, Leah, you can take something else big on if you take something else off, because he knows I've got 4,000 different things flying. So that's the question. That's a good question.
In other words, that what might be right for you right now is limiting yourself and focusing on what your priority, taking on your priorities and not overextending yourself. And
that's her question is, how do you, I'd love to do something big and grand, but how do you do that with all the other things that are juggling? How do you know if you should or not?
Well, what if you feel that you really are overwhelmed? You can't manage everything that's on your plate, and then it's not the right time for you. If you're overwhelmed by what you're doing, and you feel you're not giving enough in the areas which some of the missions are essential missions. Your mission as a spouse, your mission as a parent, those are essential. You can never you really can't cut corners on those missions. And if you feel you're simply overwhelmed that just getting the laundry done every day, it's not the point of time for you to be taking on something else. What you described about Steve telling you, if you want to take on something else, you have to drop this. That's a budgetary process. Now you're supposed to be able to say, well, where's the money?
Go in with the questions, Sarit. She's got a lineup of them. Okay, go ahead.
No, so it seems across the board that what I'm seeing from Facebook and Instagram and God, it's just that.
And Torah anytime.
Yeah, it's just that as a mother, meaning, do we try to stretch ourselves past our daily mission? taking care of our kids, taking care of our husbands, and feeling good about that.
Well, the issue, I think we answered that because we said the issue is make what you're doing your mission, not what you're doing is to get it done with so that, and then you'll really live. Like that's your mission at this moment. There's nothing else to take on.
But they're not writing about it. Any mother, no one's writing a book about a mother who just wakes up in the morning, gets her kids out.
Oh, you mean, but that isn't that a famous?
Dinner.
Well, I'm not sure that that's true. They may not write a whole book. We often do write books. There's a lot of writing. There's a lot of very beautiful writing about people who found themselves. I mean, we do uncover strengths that we didn't know we had in certain circumstances. Like they always give the mushel that if a mother sees a car on her child, that a mother, 125-pound mother may be able to lift the car up because she's so focused on saving her child. I think I'm putting out a book. It's called 100. It's going to be called Ordinary Greatness, but it's essays that I've written about people that most of them you've never heard of them. Somebody I knew in Shul who passed away from pancreatic cancer in his early 40s. But I was such a person that I just sat behind him in Shul. I never talked to him. I sat 2 rows behind him in Shul. I never talked to him because I never thought I had any. I saw that he was a person who used every moment, and I never thought I had anything important enough to distract him from that until the very last months of his life. There are so many remarkable people. I think that's one thing we should just look around and see. I sometimes come in and I'm just excited about the people I meet in the stairwell. I'm glad I grew up in a nice house, and I live now in an apartment building with 13 other families or so. And I'm glad because I meet people on the stairs. And there's somebody in Los Angeles. I don't know if he's still I think he just moved to Henderson, Nevada, named Ephraim Shore. Now, Ephraim Shore woke up one day on the second day of Rosh Hashanah and found out that he was a quadriplegic. He'd gotten Guillain-Barré disease, and he couldn't move any limb in his body. And that went on for 2 years. Even today, he travels with a large staff, which he calls Mate Ephraim, the staff of Ephraim. But he has a little card. He passes out cards. He does a lot of things. You'll read it when the next book comes out called Ordinary Greatness. But one of the things that he does, he passes out cards. One of the cards he has is said, everybody that you meet is carrying a peckle you know nothing about. Everybody's carrying a package, has something that you know nothing about. A good friend of mine yesterday told me, he had never told me this, a good friend, that his daughter had given birth to a stillborn baby with the cord wrapped around its neck after a long pregnancy, and where the doctors had, and whatever, and I knew nothing about it because he was the same person with the same smile. He just made a bar mitzvah. You don't know. So the flip side of this card is everybody you meet is carrying a peckle you know nothing about. The flip side is be nice and judge people favorably. If somebody doesn't act in the way you think is appropriate to you, just know they may be living with chronic pain, which eats away at a person. And, most of us can't survive a hangnail, and there are people living with constant pain. Everybody is carrying something. They're not ordinary. And we shouldn't look at ourselves as ordinary. And we should look around it's important to look around at the people around us and find out what's extraordinary about them. Not just say, none of my neighbors did they write a book about either, so big deal. I'm doing great. Nobody wrote a book.
You didn't write a book. I just have a question, and Judith, if this is too whatever, let me know. But I just would want to know, and I think our audience would want to know, sort of, what do you consider your mission?
Wow.
It's a little forward, but as a role model to us.
Okay, with the wisdom that comes with age. I'm not 20 anymore, and I've raised I think I would put my family first as my mission, my husband, my kids, And that's where, that's I feel it's my most important activity, my most important contribution, and the thing that means the most to me, the thing that I care about most. My feelings are there, and I happen to love my work. I could say that's my mission, because I feel like I'm doing something unique, and I'm growing, and I have a sort of a single-minded direction. But that's not that. No, it's my family.
But I do think, by the way, that this isn't always the case, and I don't say it's the right thing for everyone. But Judith's sense of herself does not depend on the fact that she has a famous husband. It doesn't. She likes it if somebody says that was a good column. And she sometimes even tells me herself that it was a good column. But I'm saying her sense
sometimes.
Her sense
not going to comment. Yeah.
Her sense of identity is not totally wrapped up in I'm Jonathan Rosenblum's wife. Nothing like that. She has this independent career to which she's devoted and works at very hard, always adding new therapies and new means of helping people. And I think that's, for us, it's worked out. For us, it has worked out. I'm not saying that's, I see Rosh Hashiva's wives who can, subordinate themselves entirely. And, I do think that nobody achieves a great deal unless they're happily married. I just can't, it just deprives you of too much energy. There's too much dissipated energy. To do anything in life requires energy. And that energy requires a certain sense of stability in your life, that you have a base in your life upon which you can build. If you're always worried about whether the foundations are strong, you won't have enough energy to go out and do anything else.
I think that's true. Yeah. We have a lot of single listeners, and I think, and divorced listeners and so forth. And I think they need to know, you might be right that, that is kind of, that a solid foundation maybe allows you to do more. But it doesn't mean if you're single, you can't do a lot. So we expect a lot.
No. I meant something different. If you're unhappily married, it's very hard to do anything. Right. Single, you could achieve a lot.
I see. Okay.
Unhappily married would be
unhappily married. Right. Yeah. So that, again, if that, ladies, if you learn nothing else, is that rise that.
But I would like to add that some of the women that I admire the most are the ones who are unhappily married and yet are able to make a life for themselves and get beyond it. Some are in such difficult situations, and they're not going to, and the situation isn't going to change. But can they? And
they're heroes. They're heroes, really heroes.
Yeah. Can they get up and smile and be productive and give to whoever is in their family? I mean, yeah, those are big heroes.
Oh, wow. Okay, we have time for one last question, Sarit. You're on, and then we got to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody, I know. Right. Well, 5 minutes. Okay. So somebody was just asking if when the books are written, do they only cover sort of the positive of the person's life, or do they actually go through
good question?
Okay, before I ever started writing Guttal biographies, I wrote a column called Our Guttal Biographies, our biographies of great people, good for us. And there's a famous letter from Rav Hutner, the Rosh Hashiva of Chaim Berlin, where he says, a book that doesn't bring out the struggles with which a person dealt. Everybody deals with struggles. Rav Dessler, as I said, would have been unknown. He was separated from his family. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky couldn't get a job as a shamus in San Francisco because, when he had come to America to raise funds for the Covenant Cola. They had lots of difficulties. He lost his first wife. Lots of difficulties. And they try to bring that out because Rav Hutner quoted the following pasuk. Shiva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam. A tzaddik is not a person who never has any challenges. It's not a person who's always perfect. He's a person who faces those challenges, and even when there's a failure or a fall, gets up. The key is V'Yakam. He got up. he got back up again after, he said, we read about the Chafetz Chaim, we all assume that the Chafetz Chaim never spoke Lashon Hara, never spoke improperly. Where do we get that idea? What makes you think that he was never a young boy? Now with the Chafetz Chaim, it probably is true that he never did, because at 12 or 13, he saw his mother unhappy one day, and he asked her what was the problem, and he says, and she told him, your stepfather, she was a widow, she had been widowed, your stepfather wants you to marry his daughter, who was 5 years older than him, and he was very young. And he says he'll divorce me if you don't marry his daughter. So the Chafetz Chaim said, okay, so what's the problem? So I'll marry her. I mean, I'm just saying, the Chafetz Chaim might have been a little bit different than most of us. But Rav Hutner did write, we have no reason to assume that the Chafetz Chaim, before he wrote Sefer Chafetz Chaim on proper speech, had never spoken improperly or something. That it's not something that can be assumed. Everybody develops. No one's born full blown. They don't spring, I think this phrase is full blown from Mars's brow. But anyhow, that's not how they come out. You develop. And a good biography brings out that development. If it doesn't,
tell us how can they get to your book? How can they read your book? Because I'm so excited. Everyone's talking about it. I feel really lame that I'm not on top of it yet. But we're
yeah. I actually was thinking that myself. I mean, where's a copy of the book to at least hold up the cover?
Oh yeah, do you have one? Do you have one there?
Well, we could go get one, but
okay, we're out of time or whatever. Okay, if she gets back in time. So you go to www.artscroll /
Artscroll, yes.
And then just type in Jonathan Rosenblum, and it's called
you can type in Jonathan Rosenblum.
Jonathan with Y-O. Okay, just Rosenblum. R-O-S.
Rosenblum would do it. B-L-U-M.
B-L-U-M. And then it's called a tap on the shoulder. You can remember it, tapping on the shoulder or whatever. Oh, there it is. Black. Yeah. Fantastic. Show it up a little higher, a tap on the shoulder. Everybody's talking about it. This is the inspiring. When you said the thing about you see that when you're doing God's work, when you're drawing the right thing and we're trying to bring peace into the world, God helps you. That's like, oh my gosh, totally irresistible. So before we go, I want to wish you a happy birthday. You really should live in health and be well. Both of you have Shalom Bayis 220 and have nachas from your grandkids and your kids and your grandkids. And we send lots of love. Thank you so much for being on the show. We loved it. They're waving. Thank you everybody for joining us. This has been very, very special. This is Leah Richeimer for the Ladies Talk Show, and we'll see you next time. Here's the thing, ladies. If you don't subscribe, you may miss out and you're going to miss some great content. So you need to either like us or follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook, on Torah Anytime, on YouTube, or go right to our website, www.ladiestalkshow.com, and fill in a subscription button. And then you'll get every week an update on exactly what's happening. And if you do that, oh, by the way, if you subscribe on our website, you also get 10 tips to have a great relationship. Don't miss it. And don't forget to subscribe.